Hey everyone, welcome back here to Techstrong TV. I'm very excited. This weekend I'll be getting on the plane and heading to beautiful Prague, Czech Republic, for what promises to be, I think, maybe I'm wrong, probably the biggest SUSE Con ever.
It will be. Yep.
And there's so much going on. We've been touching on it. I did a webinar last week with Margaret Dawson, CMO of SUSE Con and of SUSE, and we're going to be doing a lot more coverage there. We'll have a newsletter coming out for it, so stay tuned. But I thought it would be good before the craziness, or maybe the craziness already has set in, but before the craziness sets in, to grab Margaret for a couple of minutes here and give you all a little sneak peek into this year's conference and why it's so popular, why it's so important. Margaret, welcome to Techstrong TV. It's great to have you back on.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Well, it's my pleasure, actually. But for those who don't know, as I mentioned, Margaret is the CMO of SUSE. She has a long history.
Not too long.
Not too long. I realized when I said that. But Margaret has held a variety of very senior level positions that make her eminently qualified to be sitting in this chair and going over what we're going to talk about. So, Margaret, don't mean to embarrass you or say anything out of school there, but the theme for this year's con is Shape Your Resilient Future.
Yep.
And I got to tell you, in a world where it's AI this and AI that, and what's AI going to do for you and me, it's refreshing to see a title that at least doesn't have AI in the title, though AI, I'm sure, is going to have its place at the table. But when we say Shape Your Resilient Future, Margaret, what do you actually mean by that? What are we talking about?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was interesting when we were coming up with ideas for themes. Of course, there's a million things that we could talk about, but whether customers were dealing with, I need to reduce cost, I've got to modernize, I've got to get off VMware, I need to implement AI, I need to migrate more apps to the cloud or repatriate things from the cloud, whatever it is that is the priority, there was this theme that kept coming back, and it was around resiliency. And while people have different ways of describing what resilient means to them, it always goes back to, I need to get more control, right? So for some, resiliency equals sovereignty. For some, it equals just data protection. For some, it means just a foundational ability to feel like I am reliable, secure, stable, like I can keep things in control as chaos is going around me, right? And we're seeing with everything going around, not only with AI, but cybersecurity, geopolitical pressures, you name it, people are just under so much pressure. And so what they need is that sense of security around resiliency. So it was very intentional. And the Shaping Your Resilient Future also is about doing this together. So it goes back to our open source roots and community and the fact that, anything that you do can be done better when you have your community around you and that we can all see and participate in the open source way.
Love it. Of course, when you came up with this and talked about it, I don't think you or the SUSE folks are prescient, but who would have thought that the week before the show, this whole mythos and Project Glasswing and everything that's blowing up, you want to talk about resiliency. If we're ever going to need resiliency, it's going to be now. And if we're ever going to need community, because no one company, no one country is going to be big enough, I think, to really take this on, take the bull by the horns here and secure. I mean, everything's up for grabs.
No, 100%. And you're even seeing increased calls also for that open standard, right? Because we know that if we have transparency, it improves the ability for us to be secure. It gives us, hundreds and thousands of people working together in the community to improve the security. So I think, when AI and security are becoming so core, open standards, whether it's around MCP or around agentics or around anything, like how we provide those open standards so everyone is kind of working on the same page is so important. So there'll be a lot of discussions, I think, around that.
I agree with you. I have news for you. I think you ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to open standards, because truly the only way we're going to get through the gauntlet here of this, vulnerability apocalypse is open, right? Companies working together. That's this whole Project Glasswing. There's 40 to start, but there'll be a lot more companies adding in, working together as a community to harden and to be resilient. I mean, resiliency is the name of the game. So kudos, whoever on the team picked it there. Your timing is
It was
impeccable.
a group effort. I will tell you, it was definitely a group effort. It kind of came together. But what was interesting is when we first came out with the theme, you weren't really seeing this term resilience. And I swear, I don't know, like you said, I would love to say we were omniscient, but like you see this word resiliency coming up more and more and more and more. So it definitely, the drumbeat was there. And the only thing I'll add when we talk about community is one thing I'm really excited about with SUSE Con is we have more kind of sponsors and partner ecosystem. If I just look at the keynote stage, it's amazing. We've got AMD, AWS, Fujitsu, Dell, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody here that I'm going to get in trouble with. But there is amazing partners across, whether it's hardware, software, AI, you name it. We're going to be talking to a broad ecosystem that is helping customers put these solutions together to become more resilient.
I love it. Just kudos to you and the team, though. You nailed this one. As we get under resiliency and resilience, though, there are themes, kind of underneath that main current. Flexibility, control, choice.
Yep.
Right? And this goes to the heart of SUSE's history, right? Of their legacy, of their DNA. Open infrastructure. We spoke a little bit about open, but SUSE was an open source company before open source was cool, right?
Yeah.
So that whole thing, giving customers choices. You don't have to use the whole SUSE stack. I remember when SUSE announced, you could mix in other packages, and this is going back a while. And then I think it was at last year's show, right? Didn't you put together your own secure packages of the most popular
That's right.
Linux packages?
I think choice is absolutely the underlying. If I had a sub theme, right, it would still be the power of choice, and open is core to that. But what you're talking about is we have a very composable architecture across our stack. So it's not opinionated, you could say, or it's not tied together so tightly that you can't do one piece without the other. So what that allows you is choice within our ecosystem, but also if you have a different operating system today and you want to run, SUSE Ranch or Prime on top of it, you can do that. That's very different than the competition. If you want to use all SUSE, obviously it works better than, any other combination, but it's not required. And I think this goes back to one of the core things that we provide that you and I have talked about before is we are the only company that allows you to work with SUSE to manage not just our Linux, but any Linux, as well as support. So we provide extended support for many flavors of Linux after the vendor itself, has stopped providing that support, because a lot of companies need more transition time. The same is true for Kubernetes. We obviously have our own Kubernetes, but we manage anything with our multi-cluster management capability. So the reality of most, if not all enterprises, as well as governments, is they have a heterogeneous, complex environment that has a ton of existing infrastructure applications and, the need to modernize and implement now AI and cloud native and all the latest next gen technologies, take it all the way to the edge, and beyond. And so that ability to simplify management, simplify security across that heterogeneous stack is hugely valuable.
Absolutely. And here's the breath of fresh air, though. In an age where companies are trying to build walled gardens, trying to lock in, everybody's afraid of losing someone moving their cheese. Everyone's afraid of losing their edge with this AI stuff, right? And so they're trying to, they play the platform game. It's an old game. You've been in IT. I've been in IT and tech long enough.
Who has the platform wins used to be what we'd say.
Exactly. And they're still playing that game. But you know the old saying, the harder you grab sand in your hand, the more leaks out between your fingers. Sometimes you got to set it free, and if it's yours, it comes back to you. A little Jonathan Livingston Seagull for those who remember. Yeah, well, yeah, that's me. But anyway, but that's kind of the SUSE model here, which is, hey, take what you want, that makes sense for you to use. Right. If you need the whole thing is there and it works really well together.
Right.
But the individual pieces play well with other pieces as well.
Yeah. And I think I'm just going to take it back to open standards a little bit. I just read this stat that said, as we look forward to LLM models, it's expected that some 70-80% of models in the future will be private models, not public models. And they'll be customized as well. Like the insurance platform will be based on its own private model. But how do you integrate across these different things? Or how do you talk to a private model and a public model? And that's where open standards comes in, whether it's with the MCP server or we continue to look at open APIs, right? So there's always this place, even as you need to customize or create a private version of something, that we want to still have these open standards for that extensibility, for that interoperability, for the integration, because otherwise we're just, that walled garden becomes an inability then to innovate and scale.
Absolutely. And it's the balkanization of everything. You lose the advantage of this whole great thing we're building it. However, the flip side is people want that flexibility. They want that choice. One of the big drivers of this is digital sovereignty. And again, this is something that SUSE has got out in front of and is really one of the leaders in digital sovereignty solutions. And not only solutions, Andreas is a friend. I follow him pretty religiously on LinkedIn and everything. True thought leadership. So not just trying to sell something. I'm talking about true thought leadership. And what does it really mean? AI sovereignty, digital sovereignty, cloud sovereignty, right? Software sovereignty. What is that? All these different sovereignties, what does it really mean? And again, SUSE, it's a topic that's so hot. And I think we mentioned on the webinar, it's not just a European thing. 31 or 32% of US-based companies indicated it was a big deal to them.
That's right. No, this is a global phenomenon. And I think, it goes back to all those things. So to be sovereign, which means I need control of where my data resides or where my capabilities reside for whatever reason, right? We can say geopolitical is a pressure. We can say cybersecurity is the pressure. And as you mentioned, for some people, sovereign just literally means protection, security. And for others, it has, more geopolitical implications. But regardless, we still go back to how do you stay true to that open standard mentality, right? So you can be, sovereign by choice, as we like to say, but open by design. So going back to that open architecture, going back to that modularity and composability, but with the end goal of sovereignty. And so I think what you'll see throughout SUSE Con is that juxtaposition of, AI innovation and open, digital sovereignty and open, right? Heterogeneity and openness. So all of that leads you and allows you to be more resilient. And it all goes back to that choice of doing it kind of your way. And not to kind of borrow from the American Burger King commercials, but I really do think that is kind of a good analogy, because if you're feeling out of control, how do you get back control? You have that choice to do it the way you need to do it for your organization in your specific situation, in whatever corner of the world you're in and whatever competitive pressures you're facing.
Agreed. I don't. So to me, that's really as counterintuitive as it may be.
Right.
Digital sovereignty is about choice. I need the choice to pick the right solution for me, whether I'm talking about AI or cloud or platform or flavor of Linux even. I need the choice to pick what's right for me.
That's right.
And that's what I think. And that's why I think individual sovereignty is part of this digital sovereignty as well.
I mean, it's interesting. I'm actually doing a session at SUSE Con around this very issue of kind of standardization versus risk management. And it's all going back to, as you try to scale, there is benefit in trying to standardize on some of our architectural layers. Like, do I make some big bets around a certain flavor of Kubernetes, a certain operating system, a certain observability platform, et cetera? We could go on and on, automation, et cetera. And sometimes you need to do that. You need to do that from a security standpoint, a policy standpoint, a cost standpoint. But then there's that, if I take too big of a bet or I over standardize, is that just hurting my ability to do business continuity, to manage my risks, not get so tied in with one vendor or one technology that I've lost that choice. I've lost that flexibility. And the thing that I always talk about with customers is, rather than starting with that layer, start with what you're trying to do. Is the goal of that workload or that data set or that experience sovereignty? Is it, more about a customer facing app that's directly tied to revenue and it needs to be, really adaptable and always on? Like, start with the criteria and the needs of that workload, of that application, of that experience, and then figure out what's right in terms of, underneath the iceberg, so to speak, at the infrastructure layer or, the data center layer or the cloud layer, right? Whereas sometimes we like to start, with the answer instead of asking the questions.
Agreed, 100%. I want to move to a fourth area that I think is going to be really deeply explored at SUSE Con, and that's this, let's call it the new stuff, right? Well, some of it isn't that new, but cloud native, right? It's already, if you're having a greenfield app, cloud native probably is your system of choice. It's 70+% of greenfield or cloud native. But it's also becoming the dominant stack for AI applications as well, right? They're running on Kube and so forth.
AI workloads are containerized workloads most of the time. I mean, I'm sure there's exceptions, but the majority,
like critical mass, 75% plus. The edge has become real, right? We've been talking about the edge for a couple of years, and again, SUSE positioned themselves well to be an edge player, right?
Well, we started that early, both with a couple things. One is, a lot of people have followed K3S, which is a Kubernetes flavor that is made for more resource-constrained environments, and the edge is a perfect example of that. We also have the ability with SLES, with our SUSE Linux, and that composability to just use the pieces that are needed in whether it's near, far, or tiny edge. And then, as you know, recently we acquired a company called Losant, and that is taking us all the way to the industrial IoT. So think sensors and manufacturing, or, the tiny edge. And so no matter what the edge means to you and what you need, people don't always realize the need for software on literally, the tiniest sensor bits and whatever. And so that architecture and how that all fits together from that furthest edge all the way to, the data center. And how do you think about that in a consistent, resilient, secure, stable, and yet flexible way? So you're literally using the hardware, the software, the chips, and the security that you need for that specific application or that specific environment. So there'll be a lot of talk about that, a lot of, hybrid environments, this flexibility across all these different places. I mean, that's the reality. And to innovate, you need to have, that agility.
So we've made it all this way. We haven't really talked a lot about AI. But I'm sure there's going to be
So there's going to be some really, really, really exciting announcements
I'm sure
around
there's going
AI.
to be something.
I so want to say it.
All
but
right.
I
Look,
promise.
it's just you and I. Who's listening? No.
Oh, yeah. Who's listening?
Next
It's
time,
just going to be on
but
the World
there
Wide
is going to be, yes, there will be AI.
What did you say yesterday or whenever we were talking? You said the internet, and I almost started giggling because I'm like, oh my gosh, when do we don't even say that anymore.
Yeah, no, we
there
don't.
is going to be some big announcements around AI, major partners. I am super excited about this. I mean, we are all in, and we'll be doing some things that SUSE has never done before with partners around AI. And it's all about helping our customers right? Move to the future and do it in a way that works for them. So you definitely want to stay tuned on, Tuesday, the 21st is when all the big announcements will be going out. So I'm sure your newsletter will be full of that.
Shocked.
And I think there's two things. I will say quickly that when we say AI at SUSE, we kind of have two sides of that coin. One is just the AI capabilities we are building into our infrastructure software, right? So MCP server, automation, agentic capabilities. So how are we making it easier to manage, integrate, automate, whether it's our container management platform Rancher or whether it's Linux or other capabilities. So that's kind of one piece, all the way, edge and hybrid cloud, et cetera. The other piece is how are we building the best infrastructure software and solutions for your AI workloads, whether those be private LLM models that we just talked about, right? But, AI capabilities or workloads, increasingly need to be able to scale in a way that we've never done before, right? And how do you get Kubernetes to scale in that way? How do you have the security and the policy control that you need? So how do you manage across these different environments? So there'll be a lot of discussion about that. And you'll hear announcements around both sides of that AI coin.
I love it. You mentioned the webinar we did last week. And that was based on this fantastic survey SUSE did.
Yep.
A lot of information. One of the things that stuck with me, asking people, where do you get your information? Where do you trust? Where do you like to learn? That kind of thing. Number one, I think, was still analysts and reports and stuff like that. But number two was industry conferences.
Right.
Meeting with my peers, going to industry conferences. As people out here, if you haven't made up your mind, but you can get to Prague for SUSE Con. Margaret, where do you think the big hallway conversation, they could read the agenda, there's great stuff coming, but the hallway conversations, the water cooler stuff, the give and take that takes place in person, what do you think about that at SUSE Con? What do you think those are going to revolve around?
I think the whole reason those conferences and why we still need that human engagement, especially in this, AI era, is building trust. I think a lot of those conversations are going to be, what can you help me with? Here's what I'm struggling with. And the great thing is we're going to have, the end users will have partners across all the different, from channel to the ISVs to the SIs, kind of the entire ecosystem. And I think a lot of it is going to be, how are you solving this problem? What have you seen? Customers talking to customers and saying, oh, you did that with SUSE. That's interesting. We're doing this, right? So sharing experiences, sharing those stories and testimonies. And then I'll just tell you, in past years, SUSECon we're solving problems. I mean, we leave that event and there's real work that comes out of that. That's like, okay, we're ready to go. But there's something about being face-to-face and having those meetings and, going to sessions and hands-on labs and demo palooza. And the energy, I think, is going to be amazing. You can feel it at SUSE now in every conversation. There's such amazing energy. But I think at the end of the day, the focus is going to be, how do we help each other get to that place that we need to go, whether it's, resiliency or innovation or the combination of the two, and hearing real world stories, and sharing with your peers. I mean, that is the power.
Absolutely. You kind of jumped the shark on my last question, but let me ask it anyway. When people leave SUSECon this year, what's the one idea or mindset that you hope they bring back to their teams and it's contagious?
SUSE's got you. We're holding you in our hands. We can do this with you. We'll help you, whatever that journey is. We will do that. And like we say, it's shaping your resilient future together. And I think that is the theme that we want to take away.
Margaret, you're one of my favorite people to interview. I got to tell you the truth. It's a pleasure. I'm really excited. We get there Sunday. We'll be there all week. My video team, our analysts, Mike Vizard will be there as well.
And we're going to go share one bottle of really good wine because they have really good wine in Czech Republic. Not only Czech wine, but you get Italian wine everywhere in the Czech Republic. I'm just saying that's not part of the deal, just to be clear. But if someone sees me and you're at SUSECon and you want to go have a good glass of wine, just look me up. I'm ready.
I'm going to hold you to. I just got back
Okay.
from Napa. I'm in a wine sort of mindset anyway, but we're
It's a
ready.
Billy Joel song. Oh no, it's New York State of Mind. Sorry, I'm confusing.
Yeah, well, but you can always. Did I ever tell you he's my neighbor here?
Billy Joel is your neighbor?
He lives across the
I love his
intercoastal
music.
right by me.
Okay,
Eddie,
we're
me
getting
too.
completely
All
off
right, we're
track
done.
here.
But
All right.
Margaret, hey, forget Billy Joel. Forget the wine. Come to SUSE Con. Don't miss it.
Thank
It
you,
is
Alan.
next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We'll be there. Margaret, thank you.
Thank
We're
you.
going to take a
always.
break on Techstrong TV. We'll be back in a minute.
Hi, I'm Jon Swartz. I'm back at RSAC in San Francisco at Moscone South. It's day one, and we hope you're off to a good start here. We're here with Matthew Andriani, who's the CEO of Maze. How do you pronounce that? MazeBolt?
MazeBolt.
MazeBolt. And Matthew, I'm going to ask you to take the floor and tell me a little bit about MazeBolt. I had a bunch of questions I want to ask you, but first let's kind of lay a groundwork so our audience has a better understanding of what your company does.
Thank you, John. Good to be here. We are in the DDoS space with Akamai, Imperva, Amazon, Cloudflare, all of these mitigation players. We don't do what they do. We augment those systems. They've got good protection that's deployed at various enterprise organizations. What we do is we find out how attackers are able to penetrate all of those layers of protection all the time. So that's what MazeBolt does.
So you kind of enhance what those other companies do as kind of an additive.
Correct. Typically what we see is we go in, there's around a 63% automated protection on average. Using our data of attack simulations ongoing, we can get that to over 98% automated protection.
So you, just kind of a sidelight, but it's important to know, I'm going to ask you a little bit about national cyber warfare and about geopolitical tensions, but you arrived in the U.S. a few weeks ago,
Yes.
traveling from Jordan.
Yes.
How was that?
It was interesting. I took a taxi from where I live to the southern border in Israel, crossed the border, took another taxi to the hotel. The next morning, took a flight out to Athens, Frankfurt, and then to the U.S.
How long did that journey take?
Left Thursday morning, got to the U.S. where I wanted to be in Vegas Saturday night.
Oh my God. We're glad you're here and we're glad you're safe. This is kind of a terrifying, it is a terrifying era we live in right now. And I'm imagining given what's going on in the world and given the advances in AI, that we have this evolving landscape of DDoS attacks. There must be some sort of strategies that enterprises are using to stay resilient. Could you maybe explain what they're doing to keep themselves defensed?
First of all, you're right. The current landscape, even before the explosion of AI, was already a very high threat, where enterprises were deploying defenses with many layers of defense. What they are trying to do now is close those gaps before an attack comes and try and preempt. I think this is a theme across not just DDoS, this is a theme across the industry.
So before, just to be clear, it was kind of a reactionary approach. Now it's a preemptive defense approach.
I think in general across the cyber realm, right? People that are responsible, CISOs that are responsible for the organizations or government, they're trying to figure out, okay, we've got all these defenses in place. What do we do to harden all of those and augment new defenses? But your existing defenses need to be working. I think there's a huge focus in this area. We focus in this area in DDoS.
It's interesting because I work with a number of folks who are security experts.
Right.
They started companies, Alan and Mitchell are still secure, and they always talk about this kind of concept of security where traditionally, maybe until now, it was more of a kind of an evolutionary industry or technology versus the revolutionary things that are happening around it. So for instance, as cloud came along or as AI, there are quantum leaps in terms of how technology is used. And whether by design or maybe out of just habit, cybersecurity was always kind of the last consideration, and we'll get to that, and we'll fix that once we have to. And that you're kind of telling me in a sense that attitude or that posture among CISOs and others is changing.
I think you're right. The industry is evolving very quickly, and the technologies are evolving very quickly. If you're not getting ahead of it and figuring out how to prevent damage, you're going to have the damage. And I think visibility is critical, and figuring out how you protect your particular organization is critical across the spectrum, whether it's from the external, internal, lateral movement, whatever you're trying to protect.
So that brings me, in a sense, again, back to AI, in that we get a lot of surveys, we write about a lot of surveys, a lot of studies, and what we consistently see is that there is a pressure from the top down to adopt AI as quickly as possible, maybe with not as much stringent governance or upskilling among employees, safeguards, guardrails, whatever you want to call them, and that has created a tension or created a very difficult situation for the CISOs, because they're under pressure to put these systems in place, like agents, for instance. But they're also responsible for the consequences if something were to go awry. So I'm wondering how CISOs are kind of reconciling the pressure from the top down to adopt AI, yet still maintain safe and secure operations.
So I think AI is a huge topic. CSOs are under pressure. Some CSOs tried to block AI at the beginning. That lasted a few days or a couple of weeks at the maximum.
What if were there CSOs who got forced out if they were too slow or?
I don't know. I don't know of any, but I think the internal pressure was very quick. I think what you've seen is the smart organizations are looking at what they've got in the whole AI space, providing kind of a singular offering to the various departments, scaling down the amount of AI tools, but still letting people fluidly work. I think that any company that isn't using AI is going to just fall far behind. They're not going to be around. They're not going to be around, and I think everyone recognizes that the speed is incredible. When you get to the attack side, you can see, if you just use ChatGPT, you can see the speed that you're getting answers. Now, if you just apply that in a very limited fashion to just orchestrating attacks against organizations, you can imagine the speed that that's moving at. Any manual process that you rely on in an organization, with an AI orchestrated attack, you don't stand a chance. Which brings us back to what we do in our company. We provide that data prior for those defensive systems to be immunized prior to that attack ever arriving, because any type of reaction with a human element in it is slowly going to become redundant. And when I say slowly, I think over the next 18 months maximum.
Maybe if you could go a little bit deeper into some of the products you have and what they do and how they work in concert with some of the companies you mentioned earlier. There's a couple that you could just highlight, just for those who are unfamiliar with
Sure. So at the core of what our technology does is we are a company that figured out how to simulate non-disruptive DDoS attacks against production systems. That's the core patented technology that we developed over many years. It was released in 2021. So if you've got hundreds or thousands of services, we're launching hundreds of attack simulations validating how your defenses work through actual data.
So you're kind of testing, but in a non-threatening way. You're testing the defense systems that are set up at these companies, these enterprise companies, and then you come to them with a report and say, here's where you failed, or here's where you were successful, and here's what you need to address.
So we give exact telemetry on every single layer of defense you've got, and we operate on big data sets. So we're launching thousands of simulations over a month's period, and with just a few fixes, you can de-risk many thousands of entry points for attackers in an ongoing way because of things like configuration drift and security policies. We, in 2022, started significant research in AI because we generate what's referred to as unique data in the AI industry. We are now able to find, with a limited amount of knowledge on the targets that we see in an environment, point our simulator there, knowing where those vulnerabilities are likely going to be, and get that data as quickly as possible to the vendor responsible for that particular layer of security, so that when the customer's attacked, you prevent this initial damage or extended damage.
Was your background always in cybersecurity, or were
Yes.
you? I'm always wondering what led you to. I'm assuming you co-founded this company.
Yes.
What led you to co-found this? You saw immediate need, or you'd come across some examples of kind of like high-profile incidents, or?
So I was very involved in forming the team in Radware, like in 2011. That was a research team that we scaled to an emergency response team that I was essentially dealing with real-time attacks against large organizations like the New York Stock Exchange, Hong Kong Stock Exchange, Vatican, all the banks in the US doing large operations, coming up with solutions in real time to mitigate those threats. And I then started a services company, seeing that every one of those attacks that I saw that caused extensive damage sometimes for months, could have been prevented relatively easily. And when you look at these large organizations that had seemingly endless budgets, what they didn't have was the knowledge of how those systems are bypassed. So we started actually as a cyber services company, and through need transitioned to a product company in 2021.
So I'm assuming that business is probably booming for you, or
Yes.
you're getting more inquiries than ever, because I'm thinking about this classic scenario of people employing AI agents. I mean, I even read that Mark Zuckerberg is going to have his own chief of staff AI agents,
Right.
with access to his ideas and his information. And I'm just wondering that must have is setting off alarm bells in a lot of these sectors where the bad guys. I mean, they're making as much use of AI agents as the white hats are, but there must be a palpable sense of anxiety, I think, within enterprises, especially as agents, of course, begin to be adopted at these companies.
Yeah, and depending on what first of all, yes, and depending on what you're responsible for, if you're responsible for hosting the agent infrastructure, you've got an entirely new threat to deal with in terms of even how you inspect your traffic, right? Agents are completely new traffic. They're not traditional web traffic or API traffic that you were used to in the past. This is different traffic. And I think that protecting these agents is going to become very complex because they're very dynamic. They're expanding and contracting.
Can I ask you really quickly? So, conceivably we're going to have security AI agents that defend against AI agents that are malicious. So could we conceivably have AI agent versus AI agent duels between good and nefarious purposes and good purposes, or?
I think in the enterprise space, you're going to see definitely orchestration agents operating. We already got it in companies. We're actually going to release later this quarter a very significant AI capability, which I can't get into too much yet. But it's going to be something that is going to validate a lot of these types of protections, because we understand that very, very quickly, and we're already getting some information from vendors and customers we're working with, that AI is going to be orchestrating a significant amount of attacks.
Do you expect, in that vein, do you expect a fair number of announcements at RSAC along those lines, like AI agent defense systems of sorts that are brought out by companies? They're going to have some sort of platform or architecture to address this special problem you're talking about?
I think there's going to be companies dealing with many areas of, you say AI agents, but obviously AI is a large area.
Autonomous.
LLM poisoning, finding out, for instance, all of the models that you use in AI, how contaminated are these models? Where do they come from?
Yeah.
They might be open source. What's in those models? Who made those models? How are they leaning? There's models made in China, models made in America. What's inside those models? How do you isolate those models in an environment to make sure that you're not going to damage your environment and have unnecessary leakage? For instance, what we're doing in our company, we've got a significant project ongoing now for a couple of years, where we have a significant infrastructure being built, which is actually completed now, that we kind of anonymize all of our PII data before even starting to utilize it in that area, what we deem the non-PII area of our environment, because you don't know what these LLMs are going to do. Even if they're privately hosted, you don't really know. So you need to assume, kind of like in the cloud. You send data in the cloud, if that data is not encrypted, you don't know where that data is going. It's very similar with an LLM model, whether you're forming it locally or using a local database to maybe query external LLM models like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it might be.
I mean, it's just that, to me, what's stunning or what's kind of troubling is the speed with which these new models are being pumped out.
Right.
Like, I mean, conceivably, it seems like every other month there's a new model from Claude, there's a new Claude model or GPT or what have you, and there's a lot more use of open source. So there's speed with which things are moving and advancing makes this a particularly difficult time to defend your operations.
I think it also opens up a lot of opportunity. Because, for instance, companies like us, again, we generate a lot of proprietary data that are vulnerability data on environments across the spectrum. We've got millions of data points, which allows us to leverage this to better protect our customers. And the AI allows us to get big data sets much quicker, to be able to deliver to the vendor in a more organized fashion, to eliminate the most amount of vulnerability in the attack surface as possible. So it does bring a lot of opportunity, but you have to have, at least as a vendor, you have to take into account what you're doing with the AI, what the threats are, make sure that everything is QA'd between results automatically, AI kind of checking AI, QAing the AI, so that that it's reliable for your customer, that there won't be an accident.
So most of your, I'm not sure if you share the names of some of your customers, but if you don't, I'm wondering what sectors are they primarily come from, and what, if any, are their particular concerns?
We're in the 87 percentile plus in the BFSI industry, so banks, insurance companies, trading platforms, payment processors, credit card. Government also, large e-commerce, but we primarily focus on the BFSI industry.
Okay.
And they're concerned about infrastructure uptime, service uptime, banking continuing, no disruption to banking services, transactions. There's a high volume of transactions happening in these environments. You can't have downtime.
I was thinking about the landscape. I mean, in terms of the infrastructure, there's this big movement in the infrastructure towards faster, more use of data, AI. And I'm thinking about the landscape. We have this geopolitical tensions that you experience firsthand. We've got OpenClaw phenomenon, which, I mean, it's hitting executives within companies like Meta. There was an incident recently there. These increasingly sophisticated AI attacks. There's a lot to digest. And I'm wondering, do you foresee more kind of geopolitically motivated attacks or even national cyber warfare? We talked a little bit about this before we started filming, but I'm wondering if you mentioned DDoS involving drones and others. I mean, can you maybe go over that a little bit again?
Sure. So DDoS is used extensively in cyber warfare. We saw it in Georgia, we saw it in Ukraine, Iran. You see it all over the place when you want to cripple infrastructure, cut communications. DDoS is a great attack tool to cause chaos. You also see DOS attacks, more accurately, not DDoS attacks, for jamming drones. If you look technically speaking, this is an actual DOS attack against the receptor on a drone, and this is what stops communication and drops the drone. So this is utilized in
have you seen instances of that in the conflict in the Middle East now, or it's probably existed? But I mean, are you starting seeing an escalation of that, or maybe even infrastructure?
I'm not an expert in drone warfare, but you can see that there's a lot of activity in the area. You can see recently that the Americans even asked Ukraine for assistance in this area. So definitely, I was recently in Texas in a very prestigious research institute that does a lot of research for the DoD, and they shared some very interesting findings on what's going on with drone warfare. And what was very interesting is how much DOS attack is being used in that warfare. So definitely it's being used.
Wow. Wow, that's a little something to ponder. I mean, I was going to ask you, how do organizations anticipate sudden surges and disruptions in their infrastructure? I mean, you're helping them, but are there other means that they use to kind of anticipate things before they happen? I mean, I don't know much about your field, or is this something that is especially used, I would assume, in banking and government, finance?
Of course, the main thing any organization will do is try and have a solid architecture in their deployment and make sure that it's redundant and all these traditional concepts. I think what they're also trying to do is secure the application layer very heavily too.
Right.
So we're very focused on the application layer. Services are all over the place. They're in the cloud, they're in DC, they're in multiple clouds. So I think organizations are trying to first get a grip on the attack surface, figure out how to protect that attack surface as best they can, and have the redundancy to scale. But without the protection, no matter how much scalability you've got, you'll.
This is like a high wire act. I mean, in a sense, there's so much going on there. The upside is incredible,
Right.
and we should probably point out that the upside, for the most part, is what these companies are looking at in terms of efficiency, profitability, et cetera. But there's always that kind of a threat lingering in the background that they have to be aware of. So
You can see organizations that get hit with a cyber attack that makes headlines. You can see the immediate market cap effect, which can take
and we're seeing
12
more of
plus
those.
24 months,
Yeah.
and sometimes never get back to the position that they were at.
So there is that imminent threat. I mean, it's not a threat for everyone. It's not going to happen to every company, but for each company this does happen to, it sets an entire industry kind of on alarm. So,
Right.
And I think this is going to be a story we're going to see repeatedly over and over again. You always just wonder when it's going to reach a point where there is like the defining events, and I'm not sure if we've reached that event yet.
I agree. I don't think we've reached an event that says, there has to be some fundamental policy
Right.
change or something like that.
And that'll good luck.
Maybe, by the way, in cyber warfare that has happened, because there's a lot of very quick targeting of targets on the
Yeah.
ground, utilizing AI and stuff like that. But that's, of course, not in the headlines.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
think AI has had a tremendous impact on warfare in general, just the speed at which everything is moving.
It's a
And
new
it's only going to
warfare.
get quicker.
Yeah.
And of course that translates into the enterprise space. We see it already that there are AI attacks being identified, and the EU Council is doing testing on AI attacks, and other governments are checking how they're going to respond to this. So this is clear that this is happening now. It's
Right.
not the future, it's happening
Right.
now.
It's interesting. Well, Matthew, this was a fascinating discussion. I'm glad you shared your expertise with us and let us know what's going on, because things are changing faster than we could ever imagine. And it's going to make for very interesting times. I've never seen anything in the tech industry like what's happening with AI, and especially on this side of things.
Right.
So thanks again for your time. And
Thank you, John.
it was nice meeting you. And
meeting you.
we'll be back with more interviews later today, day one of RSAC.
Hello everybody, we're here in Amsterdam at the KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con Europe conference, and we're having a little chat with my friend Himanshu Singh from Broadcom about, well, what's going on with VMware and Kubernetes. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is fantastic. I mean, we're super excited about being at KubeCon. It's the preeminent conference in the Kubernetes space and for the platform engineering community, so we're glad to be part of it.
As I understand it, there's been some new extensions made to VKS, and maybe you could walk us through what those are a little bit, but as it looks to me, I think you've added support for the container networking interface, and you were kind of now building out an ecosystem. So what does that look like?
Yeah, I want to kind of maybe even take a step back to like bring people through kind of what are we really delivering overall, right? So of course the primary offering we have is VMware Cloud Foundation, which is the private cloud platform, and VKS or vSphere Kubernetes Service is an inherent integral part of that. And VKS delivers a CNCF certified fully conformant Kubernetes runtime, right? So for the platform teams to be able to use and build all applications. Now, along with VKS, we also include a variety of other building block services, VM service, volume service, network service, private AI services as well, because AI is a topic that you can't have a conversation without, right? So the idea is you've got all the building blocks in VCF overall to kind of build whatever modern application you are building, your AI application that you might be building, and it's fully extensible to any third-party service that is CNCF conformant as well, right? So what we're trying to do now is, in addition to, for example, you talk about CNI with VKS, we ship in a built-in CNI with Antrea. We include Calico in there as well, open source Calico. But what we've done now is with the latest VKS 3.6 release that recently came out, we're introducing the idea of bring your own CNI. So, you want to do any third-party CNI. In this particular case, you want to do Calico Enterprise maybe, you want to do Cilium, for example, absolutely available. This actually takes the point of view we've had with our Kubernetes platform and kind of extends it. The point of view being that we're not trying to create a highly opinionated ecosystem of our own. We want to be part of the existing community ecosystem. So the way we have built VKS, it is very, very close to the community Kubernetes, which means that one, it's easy to adopt, right? There's no customizations and all that you got to do or jump through hoops and everything. Also, it helps us release newer versions of our Kubernetes distro very, very quickly right after the community release comes out, typically within 60 days, right? So that helps. In addition to that, we're also being able to provide support for like multiple releases, like N-2 or more than that. We're including 24 months of support for all our Kubernetes releases as well. So what that does is it simplifies things from the platform team for the infrastructure teams, so that one, you don't have to worry about, hey, all these different applications need to be upgraded to the newer version at the same time. Every different team can be on their own timeline when they want to. And also by having that kind of long-term support included, it just reduces or eliminates any kind of, hey, we only get 12 months of support, we need to buy extra support and all that and those kind of things. In terms of Kubernetes, like the community comes out with a new release 3 to 4 months. So it's just, for us to be able to do that with 24 months of support, you're going to be able to upgrade within that time frame, no problem. So it just simplifies things a lot overall. So from a Kubernetes perspective, that's one area we're really happy about. The other thing I want to also call out is with the new release as well. Of course, we and folks might not know this, as part of the VCF platform, we are providing or entitling you to Ubuntu OS for free, as included. However, if you'd rather have RHEL, for example, and you want to use that, you can bring your own RHEL license. We support that completely as well. So it again furthers the idea of having a very open platform for you to be able to use the tools and the technologies that you really like, build it on the VCF platform, build it using VKS, whether you're modernizing an existing application, you're building new AI applications, for example. So I think that has been something that's been very core to VMware over time, and we're really excited to be able to continue to focus on that kind of mindset as we go forward.
It seems like we're starting to see more convergence, and early on I might have seen like a DevOps team or a platform engineering team managing Kubernetes in isolation on a handful of workloads. Now it looks like Kubernetes is becoming more mainstream, but it still runs on a VM most of the time.
Yeah.
So it seems like we're moving to some point now where those teams can work a little more easily together, because there's administrators that know all about VMware, but there's not many of them that know about Kubernetes. So how do you kind of make this team work a little more hand in glove?
Yeah, and this is a topic that's like very, very common across organizations. One is about, hey, we've got people who know the platform. Can we help them up-level and upskill them to be able to expand their scope of influence, grow in their careers, for example? Then also looking at, can I do things in a more consistent way, no matter whether I'm using virtual machines or containers, or I'm trying to build a new application? Can I avoid creating these silos, right? And so with VCF, that's been a very fundamental to our cause. So one, as a admin, you can deploy VMs or containers, containers running in virtual machines, so they're getting all the security and isolation benefits that VMs get. But you can do all that with the same set of consistent operations. So you don't have to kind of completely learn a whole new skill. You extend and build on what you already know, and you grow yourself from being a IT admin or VI admin to a cloud admin to a Kubernetes admin, for example. And so that's a key benefit of that. You get all the governance, policies, all the control that you need, but you're able to then provision your infrastructure for the person wearing the platform hat at that point in time. I don't want to say a platform team because you made the exact point of this is converging, and then we're seeing the same thing. People are wearing multiple hats. So when you're wearing that platform engineer hat, hey, because the VKS as a Kubernetes platform, it's CNCF certified, is extensible, it runs all your applications, right? So that worry is completely out of the question. You get that support, etc., that we talked about, that simplifies things, and it just comes with integrations with all these kind of common PE tools that you use, whether it is Argo CD, whether it is Helm charts, for example. So just to your point about, hey, how do we simplify things? That's the idea with built-in integrations. On top of that, in fact, the other thing what we're doing is we're not trying to create an ecosystem of our own, right? We're trying to integrate into the existing ecosystem. When the way we're doing it, we're making sure that there are validations available on VKS with a variety of other cloud native leaders in the community, in the industry. In fact, at the conference, we announced new partnerships or new collaborations that we've had with folks like F5, folks like Kong, Tigera, etc. And so that it just when customers are looking to build on VKS, it's easy for them. It's you've got reference architecture, technical guidance, etc. that's available to them, and this adds to all these similar kind of guidance that we have with others like Run AI, for example, or MuleSoft or Cosmonic for WASM. And so I think just bringing it all together, the key idea is we want to make things simpler and easier, more consistent when it comes to the cloud admin persona or a platform engineer persona. And if you look at it from an organizational perspective overall for the the decision maker or somebody with a P&L kind of responsibility, one, hey, all of this contributes to you being able to modernize your applications at a significantly lower TCO, while you're getting all the benefits that VMware has built into the platform over multiple decades, right? The enterprise-grade security, compliance, all the reliability that comes with fundamental kind of VCF platform, no matter what kind of workload you're trying to build on it, right? Whether you're deploying on virtual machines, you're deploying on containers, you're trying to do an AI application, and to your point about skill sets earlier, right? This is extremely critical because it helps to, again, not create the silos, but also be able to make sure that your organization and the resources, the people you have are able to grow in their roles and be more productive and not have to worry about certain things that the platform and the consistency of the platform can take care of for them as well. So I think, across those different types of roles that people play, we're super excited about how VCF and VKS are playing that role to make things easier for our customers.
Now we're also seeing a new type of workload in the proverbial IT zoo, and it's these AI inference models that are coming through. Is that going to force this convergence conversation? Because I can't really have a third set of teams to go support that either. So is that kind of the thing that's really going to, break the proverbial camel's back and get everybody to reorganize?
No, I hope not. And fundamentally, while I think, there's the data scientist kind of team that typically is generally a team as well, and they're really focused on kind of getting the best out of the model, the LLM that they're trying to do. And as I mentioned earlier, those private AI services that VCF comes with, we've got a set of capabilities that really for that persona. But the idea is, hey, you can extend the same platform, build in the same consistent way, and you're going to build it on Kubernetes, right? If you're building an AI application today, you're building it on a Kubernetes platform. So VKS becomes that substrate that you can build your AI applications. When it comes to the infrastructure side of things, we're giving you that set of capabilities, whether it is things like being able to monitor your GPU utilization and all sorts of different metrics, having consistent dashboards in your existing kind of VCF console to be able to get all those details in there. But also for the data scientist, you have services, for example, like And if you need to build an agent, like there's an agent builder service, there's things like data indexing, retrieval services, there's a full model runtime that comes in. There is something called a model gallery, which helps to make sure that one, you have like a role-based access, for example, so the right people are able to access the right set of models, but also that you have the governance to make sure that you're not just downloading a model from somewhere and starting to use in your enterprise, because fundamentally, and unfortunately we've seen this in the industry already, where people don't realize that they're using models that might be public, and they are using internal IP or data to query and do those kind of things, and the model ends up kind of absorbing that internal IP, which is never good for an organization. So fundamentally, we kind of put our foot down and kind of said, hey, when we look at private AI, we're thinking of private AI in terms of privacy of data, security of data, compliance as a key piece of it, making sure that a company's internal IP is protected, it stays within the boundaries that they want within their private cloud, no matter where you're deploying. You can be deploying your private cloud environment on a hyperscaler, at an edge environment, at a CSP, for example, or in-house kind of on-prem data centers. But the same benefits that the VCF platform is able to provide to any workload is applicable for AI as well. So that's kind of the way we're looking at not creating this separate silo, separate team, but bring it all together. People can specialize in the areas that they're trying to do, as a data scientist, for example, or as a platform engineer, for example, but you're building on that same consistent platform that is able to meet everybody's needs as well.
You guys have been making a case for the convergence of compute, storage, and networking for a while now. As we look at this convergence and all these things come together, will we reach a point where maybe we need to fundamentally rethink how the IT team itself is organized, and is another way of thinking about this?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point of view, right? I mean, there is always going to be, as we kind of talk to customers, there's more and more expansion of that IT team's role and bringing those capabilities together. I'm sure network admins are going to call out, hey, this. And we completely agree. Like there's going to be things that an IT admin can do that on the network side to get things started, and we've introduced some of that into the platform as well. But at the same time, you will have that kind of extra kind of specialized needs for that next level. So you can get started easily, get started faster, so that we're not creating kind of delays in the system, while you're still able to bring in that special expertise to really optimize the network, for example, or optimize your storage, or optimize your compute, for example. And so the platform is built that way, so to enable collaboration across these different teams and help them kind of see the value that they provide into the overall system, versus kind of be like, be part of that system overall versus be separate as a silo on their own.
Mm-hmm. It also seems, sometimes we'll talk about things in senses of extremes, but the reality is a little more nuanced. So we have a lot of cloud-native applications being deployed. We have a lot of legacy monolithic applications, and those are still being updated as well. They're not just being, put on the side per se, and then we're going to have integrations between them. So as we kind of put all that together, does that also require the IT team to get in tune with the development team that's kind of building more complex applications than ever, and they're all connected?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at IT teams, at the end of the day, you need to be able to manage that infrastructure, provide the right SLAs to your customer team, right? Whether the customer is the platform team that's kind of managing certain things, or if the IT team is more extended, where you're serving the needs of developers, right? You need to be able to have the governance and the control and all that stuff that you need, while being able to provide self-service access to the dev teams, etc. Provide that sandbox environment where they have all the access and the flexibility that they need, so they can be productive, they can, be creative, be innovative, and have faster time to value as they're trying to build these newer applications or modernize some of those applications, or extending a monolithic application to be able to meet certain needs, or being able to consume services from a third-party provider, for example. So from a platform perspective, that's a very key piece that we see VCF to be able to do. And so the idea of the IT teams being able to serve the needs of all those kind of different personas or internal customers is critical. So being able to manage the platform in a very consistent way, so you get the governance that you need while providing the flexibility for the other personas is something that's built into VCF as a very fundamental aspect.
So what do you see IT teams doing today that just makes you shake your head a little bit and go, folks, maybe we should be a little bit savvier than that?
Well, I think different teams are at different stages and different environments, so it's going to vary a lot. There's going to be always teams that are organized in a way that's, hey, this is the compute team, this is the storage team, this is the networking team. We do see, to your point earlier, that convergence happening more and more. There's a lot more, I would say, collaboration across those. And then there's organizations where they are trying to basically bring those roles a lot closer together. I think as we are seeing the evolution of this DevOps and SRE and kind of platform teams happening, IT admins that used to be, for example, having a very specific role, I was starting to wear multiple hats, to my point earlier. And I think as that changes, as that kind of happens, there's going to be some growing pains. There's going to be some of that kind of learning that different teams will have to do. But I think that's very, very specific to individual environments. And the customer, the user teams are going to be the ones who have the best understanding of what works for them, right? Based on how they're organized and where they want to get to. I think the critical piece for vendors like ourselves is to be able to provide the platform capabilities that meets all their different needs, and that flexibility needs to be in the solutions that the vendors offer. And so by having the point of view that I was talking about earlier, we're not trying to create a platform and an ecosystem of our own. We're trying to make sure that we are part of the ecosystem that exists, so that all the different personas are able to do what they like, do what they prefer. And so we're meeting them where they are versus other teams trying to come to them. So I think as vendors, that's kind of our responsibility to be able to make it easy, simple for our customers to be able to be more productive, more deliver all the innovation that they really need to, without having to really focus on, I need to learn this vendor's platform before I can do anything.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the art of all teams, right? There's only one team, but we need to figure out how to let everybody do what they need to do without getting in each other's way.
Yeah.
Hey, Himanshu, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and we'll be back in a minute.
Hey everyone, welcome back to our day 2 coverage of RSAC conference here in San Francisco at Moscone. I couldn't think of a better person to end our day 2 coverage than with my friend here. If you're in security, you may know her. Her name is Chenxi Wang. Chenxi has, held about every title you could think of within the security food chain. From analyst to CSO to chief strategy officer to VC founder. She's done all kinds she's done it all. Chenxi, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back.
Thank you for coming here. I don't have to thank me. Chenxi, I didn't want to embarrass you, but you all of those roles that I mentioned. And did I mention she's Dr. Chenxi Wang as well, technically, with a PhD?
I did all these things because I didn't know what I want to do when I grow up.
And I hope you stay that way for the rest of your life.
Yes,
because that keeps you young.
Thank you.
Let's jump into it. You just came off the stage. You were on a panel that you put together.
Yeah.
NVIDIA, Cerebus, and I'm missing one.
And Glean.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
So NVIDIA, as you know, is the fastest maker of billionaires.
Yes, it is.
Right? Glean is now a very fast maker of millionaires. And Cerebus is getting there.
Yes.
They are already double-digit billion.
We're seeing them grow.
And super interesting companies. Obviously, Cerebus and NVIDIA, both chip makers. NVIDIA has more software stack today, but Cerebus getting there. And Glean is purely software layer, enterprise AI layer for search, for building agents. So they're all in the ecosystem, tightly integrated together. And I had 3 of them on stage today just to talk about, from their respective points of view, where this agentic enterprise trend is going. So it's a super, super interesting discussion. We had a room full of people and questions, and love to talk about that.
So what was the consensus?
Well, there wasn't any consensus per se, but we talked about how this is a security conference, right? So security people like to put controls in place, and you feel comfortable before things move. The panel talked about why we need to move with imperfect controls, imperfect infrastructure, imperfect data, move fast, refine controls, iterate, and then potentially achieve perfection.
So some people call that DevOps, Uh,
You're right. DevOps. Yes.
that's exactly what they're describing,
yes,
right?
yes.
MVP, get
Yeah.
your MVP out, iterate, feedback loops, reiterate.
Yeah.
Some people have tried that before. But look, I have to admit, we have been on our own agentic adventure at Techstrong. I wouldn't call it enterprise per se, but we have been not even playing. We've been really digging in on agentic. And we're not a software development shop, right? We don't write a lot of software, but we produce an awful lot of content and everything that's involved in distributing and getting that content out of market and all of the pieces of it.
Yeah.
Everything from shooting this video, editing the videos, writing the articles, publishing the articles, distributing, amplifying, everything that goes into the business. And I made a deal with my people.
Okay.
I'll give, it's very similar to Jensen. I'm no Jensen Wang, but very similar to Jensen. I'll give them.
Jensen Shimel.
Yeah, Jensen, no leather coat, nothing. Oh. But I'll give them money to run agents, token money, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I just ask that every week, give me a progress report on how your agent work is doing. And at the end of the month, let's talk about what'd you do this month? How did this month go? And should we continue it?
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, it is like a Cambrian explosion of ideas and life and looking at things we haven't looked at.
Yeah.
And so there's not a doubt in my mind.
Isn't that exciting? Super
It's beyond exciting. It's almost drugs.
It's intoxicating.
It's intoxicating. Beyond even intoxicating, it's drugs. I've got people coming in the office on weekends, staying late at night, coming in the next day like they've been up all night with their agents doing things.
That's drugs.
That's drugs. It's not just liquor.
But it's better drugs than the actual drugs.
Yes,
So
it's healthier for you, I think.
I'm not sure how healthy.
Well,
Staying up
you're right.
late and not.
No,
getting
you're right.
sleep.
You're right. It's funny. We
but it's
turned
fun.
Mitchell onto it. Mitchell Ashley, who used to work for Future. He still works with me. I hooked him up on Perplexity Computer last night at dinner. He was on his phone. He didn't even eat dinner. Texted me this morning to say, I went through half of my monthly credits in one night. I said, whip out your credit card. What am I going to tell you? But this is true. So I do believe that what they're saying is and I'm a security person. It hurts me to say this, but they're right.
Yeah, we are in the middle of an evolution, right?
A revolution.
A revolution, not evolution, revolution. And everybody wants to be on the cutting edge. If you're not, you're not only left behind, but you kind of feel like it's a societal tide that you want to be part of that.
We all want to be cool, right? Yeah. The cool kids.
Exactly.
Especially in tech, a lot of us were cool kids growing up.
Yes, but for businesses, it's almost existential.
Yes, it is.
Right? And so if you don't tell your employees to experiment, to really understand the full power of AI and agentic AI as an extension, then you're not doing yourself the right service, right? And also it's like what's the analogy people are saying, that it's all the kids are running and you're staying here and the world is running too. And what are you staying here for?
Right.
Right.
Well, is it worth staying there for? There may not be anything to stay at if the
Exactly.
world moves.
Yeah.
So now let me turn this around. I'm going to put on your VC hat for me. What does this mean?
It's hard. For VC, it's really hard because things are changing so fast. What's hot, what's interesting this month, next month, the month after may be completely obsolete because it could be built into the AI platform. I know we saw with Anthropic's announcement of their
Scan.
product security capability, right? And you look at this and you say, is there a room for another independent security product?
Is AppSec done?
Is AppSec done? I don't think it's done per
No.
se, but if you're an AppSec founder, you'd be like,
So
you
I've
really
written
need to
about
understand
this.
that.
Look,
Yeah.
AppSec, for the most part, was founded on finding bugs. We scanned, we fuzzed, we found bugs, and then someone has to fix them. But someone moved the cheese in a week. We could find as many bugs more bugs than you could handle.
Yeah.
People are shutting down their bug bounty programs.
Mm-hmm.
The focus in AppSec now has to be governance.
It's possible because the way I think about it is, we move from assembly code to high-level language code. And now the high-level language code is written by AI. So what are we moving to as a human? We're moving to a higher level abstraction. And that is probably requirements and governance controls and at the end, testing controls, right?
Yes.
So human, like today I saw a term says, we're not doing human in the loop anymore because that's just too expensive, not scalable. We're doing human at the helm.
Yes,
Right?
I've seen this too.
Right. So human at the helm, meaning that we are higher level abstraction thinkers. So we have to test things and look for bugs at that level, right? Because if we're still looking for bugs at the language level, we're obsolete.
You're done, but you'll never,
Yeah.
exactly.
So AppSec has to move to that level. And then if you think about that level, looking for bugs and fixes, the current technologies may not be relevant.
I got a really personal hard question for you. So I wrote another article earlier this month. I was going to call you to get your opinion, but then I just published it. I was reading an article, I don't know if it was in the Times or the Wall Street Journal, about VCs
Okay.
and AI making some VC functions
Yeah.
obsolete.
Yeah.
Right? Because it reminded me, if you ever saw the movie Moneyball, you may not.
Yeah.
But you know,
This is the
Moneyball.
Brad Pitt movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you think of it as a bad. My wife does too. To me, it's a baseball movie. But anyway,
We know what we're focusing
Yeah,
on here.
exactly. but okay. But the thing about it is, there's two schools here. One is, let's look at the analytics of baseball and make decisions based on pure analytics. The other school of thought is baseball lives in the gut. Your knowledge of baseball, you make a gut decision. This guy could really pitch. This guy could really hit. He's a player. He's not, etc. And there was this big fight, and eventually Moneyball, the analytics won, right? The analytics don't lie. It's the same thing I see happening with VCs now. Some VCs say you could run spreadsheets till the cows come home. It's a gut feeling. It's an art, not a science, to pick a winner as a VC. How do you feel?
I agree, meaning that you can probably use AI agents to make decisions, maybe even better than we can make decisions. But I can tell you, as a VC, making decisions, picking the company is only part of the job. Another part of the job, let's say it's a very hot company. It only has room for 4 VCs, and you have 10 VCs want to go in.
Who
wins? Everybody's got agents. Who wins? It's the personal relationship.
And it's
It is, and still today is, right? Because the founders looking at the different firms, they'll say, when time becomes hard, who do I trust
to work with.
to work with? Who's going to have my backs? And if everyone has agents, how do you make that decision, right? So still, you have to have the personal trust. And that is a thing that I think a level of relationship that agents do not replace today, right?
You know,
If I walked by here today, I say, "Hey, Alan," and you say, "Oh, Chenxi, let's talk," right? If I said my agent, you
keep walking.
keep walking, right? So
There is, you know what? I think that's very analogous also to the whole IT analyst industry, right? You look at the Gartners, the Forresters, the 451s, and you were an analyst. You know this. If the AI could do the analysis as good or better than the human can, well, what value does the analyst bring to me? Well, it's the personality. It's that human to human relationship. It's trustworthiness. It's the gravitas of the person, not just of the numbers and number crunching or analysis like that.
And I think it's still like a very easy thing to think about is on LinkedIn. Now everybody's writing their LinkedIn post with
AI.
right? So all the posts are like similar. But still, some people get more likes than others. Why? Because they have personalities, right?
And there's the thing I learned. I strive really hard to put my personality into my AI stuff because I want it to be me. I despise the AI tells, as I call it, and all of that. I'll talk to you offline about it, but I've got a whole toolkit to talk for the AI to talk in shimmy voice.
Yes.
And then I have two, actually. I have classic shimmy and Brooklyn shimmy. Because when I really want to go off, I tell it right in Brooklyn shimmy. But it's a very, it's a personal thing for me. But I think that's the world we're headed towards, where people are going to count. Personality is going to count. Reputation is going to count.
Yeah.
And that's going to be good for some people, but then, and I'm not knocking Gartner, but Gartner for the last 10 or more, maybe 20 years, 15 years, has tried to sort of anonymize their agents or their analysts, right? Because like their analysts, I grew up in John Pescatori being at Gartner.
John Pescatori, I remember him.
Yeah, I mean, they were giant, they were personalities.
Personalities, yeah.
You think today, who are the personalities at some of these large analyst firms?
So
they're almost interchangeable.
Yeah, I mean, analyst is one industry that it's hard to pinpoint, but there are other industries have the analogy of a lot of things are done by agents.
Yep.
And what distinguishes you is your personality, your emotional sharpness, and whatnot, right? And I think that will be an interesting point because I subscribe to like 30 some YouTube channels, right? Too many.
Me too.
So in the beginning of the year, I'm like, oh, too many, I'm going to trim, right? So I noticed in the past 6 months, a lot of them started having AI generated content, right? The channels I visit more are the human channels. The channels that have more and more AI generated content, I visit them less and less. Not because I consciously think about it, just because I'm just not interested in them anymore because they all look the same.
I've heard some people say there's no soul. There's no soul to it.
Right. So you want that when all the cities look like Dubai, you're gonna want something else.
Right.
Right.
Someone used to say that because growing up in New York and then moving to Florida, right? I always, the weather's beautiful here.
The weather's beautiful.
But you could only appreciate Florida if you understand what the weather is in New York. Otherwise, it's just all the
But I
same.
love New York, so.
Me too, but
Yeah.
my wife won't move back there, so I'm stuck in Florida. But we go to New York once a quarter at least, and my oldest son's up in Boston now, so we go there pretty often. So I get my share of that.
Yeah.
I'm home,
Yeah.
but you know, Hawaii's like that too. It's 80. Well, now they just had terrible flooding, and I'm sorry, but generally it's 82 degrees every day, all year round, and I mean it's paradise, but
It gets boring, right? When
you go.
everything's manufactured, then you crave for organic things.
it's like that movie. What was the movie? The guy lived in it was all just like a big movie set. Jim Carrey was in it.
Oh, The Truman Show.
The Truman Show. That's kind of
Yeah.
it's boring.
Yeah,
It's boring.
yeah.
Anyway, Chenxi, it's so great catching up with you. You are always a pleasure to talk with. Enjoy the rest of RSA.
I will.
Good luck. Where can people follow you and find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Chenxi Wang, Rain Capital. I publish a lot of content
Yes, you do.
on LinkedIn, and I'm on X too, although LinkedIn is my primary
Me too.
platform, and my website is raincapital.vc.
Absolutely. Chenxi, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to wrap up day 2. Yeah, I guess it's day 2. Yesterday, we'll be here tomorrow. We'll be here Thursday. But for now, this is Alan Shimel. Enjoy. Take care.
It's Jensen Shimo.
Jensen. I'm getting a leather coat. Hey everyone, this is Alan Shimel, CEO of Techstrong. Welcome. Welcome to this very special virtual event that we are producing in partnership with our friends at Microsoft. The event is titled Unlocking the Future of Agentic Experiences. And it's going to be a series of videos in this virtual event that you're going to be able to take a look at and interact maybe with some of the analysts and speakers here. I really think you're going to enjoy and get a lot out of these videos and this event, and look forward to hearing your feedback. I'd like to kick things off with our keynote. And it's our keynote because I think we've got 2 terrific speakers in this one. And it's around the future of apps, right? And it features Futurum CEO and principal analyst Daniel Newman. If you've ever seen Daniel on any of the many TV shows or conferences that he keynotes, you know what a dynamic thought leader he is. I think you'll enjoy it. And Daniel is going to be speaking with none other than Ryan Cunningham. Ryan, of course, is corporate VP for the Power Platform at Microsoft. And, Ryan is going to share with Daniel and with you the all-up vision, the all-around vision for Power Platform. We're going to connect the dots between apps, agents, and interfaces, right? Ryan and with Daniel are going to illustrate how Microsoft is leading automation in this AI era. He's going to articulate how Microsoft is enabling every organization to build, govern, and scale intelligent solutions with unmatched speed and trust, driving the future of agentic apps. It's a great discussion, and I think it's a great learning experience. So here's Daniel Newman and Ryan Cunningham.
Alan, thanks so much for that introduction. And to introduce myself, I'm Daniel Newman, CEO of Futurum. Very excited to be here today with all of you, and even more excited to introduce my guest for this conversation, Ryan Cunningham from Microsoft. Ryan, why don't you say hello to everybody and give a little bit of background on the work you do at Microsoft?
Thank you, Daniel. It's awesome to be here with everybody today. So I'm Ryan. I'm the Corporate Vice President for Power Platform here at Microsoft. So look after all the teams of product people and engineers and designers that are building really our low-code application platform and the future of where that is going. Really excited to talk to you about that today.
Ryan, I've been working with and around your team for many years. As an analyst, it's been great to follow. Of course, the change that's been going on in this market is extraordinary. And I think that everyone out there is gonna leave this conversation knowing a little bit more. And hopefully maybe you'll give us a little bit of that secret sauce about all the stuff Microsoft's doing. Nothing too secret, though. You know how that goes.
Oh, I know.
So let's start big. I mean, when we talk about the future of apps, connecting agents, interfaces, applications, what is the kind of the North Star for Microsoft? What are you guys heading towards here?
Yeah. Look, it's a crazy time to be alive in a business application platform environment, right? Because this whole world is being turned upside down in actually two dimensions at the same time. One is how we build software, radically changing in a world of agents and vibe coding and everything that is filling up our LinkedIn feeds as technology professionals. What's really interesting right now is the dramatic expansion in efficacy of what I can build and the dramatic expansion of who can participate at the same time.
You have to be evolving the platform even more and even more quickly to get them what they need and what they're trying to do to accomplish the future that they're trying to build.
Yeah, 100%. And I would say to even build on your last comment, because it's relevant here, it's not just an opportunity for more people to tinker and build things. It's actually really an imperative. Like if we're really going to accept the premise that every company that wasn't born yesterday is operating inefficiently and needs to rapidly advance in a world of agents, then the expertise you need is not just the AI technology expertise. You actually need to go get all of the process expertise. All the humans who know what it really means to run a more efficient HR department or finance department or whatever it is, they're sitting with a real job in that department today. You got to go figure out, how do I harness that expertise and bring those tools right to the point where the process is actually happening today. And that's where you need a higher abstraction platform that has agents built into it that help do the coding, that help do the work. Microsoft does have some really unique approaches in this space. And particularly if you look at this broader world of how software is getting built and code generation and agent swarms and every other term we're coming up with right now, where we're really focused right now, particularly in the space of business applications and productivity, is really make that relevant to the way companies run and operate. We're not out there to serve any possible whim of any possible developer on the planet. There's lots of great tools for that. Microsoft makes some of them in other places. But here we're really focused on the core operating system of a company. And by that, I don't mean Windows. I mean sort of all the business applications, business processes, specialist teams of people that today make a company tick.
We're seeing consolidation in this era. Customers have a ton of choice.
Yep.
Everyone kind of says, use our agent thing.
Right.
What we're going to want to see is, the orchestration is going to be super important. And then, of course, the speed, flexibility, access to all the tools, data, cloud. And of course, Microsoft's in a very small group of companies that has pretty much all of those things.
Right.
Not the only, but one of a very small number. And I think that makes you competitive. I want to go to the pragmatic side, because a lot of the viewers here are probably thinking about, how do I do this? How do we do this in our firm? We hear some of those stats about AI ROI in the enterprise, and let's just say that I'm an absolute believer, but I do think there's some hurdles. What are those kind of key enablers you're seeing, fundamental enablers enterprises need to get right now to make sure that those POCs and those production AI projects start to work and really show value?
Yeah, we're seeing customers adopt exactly the mentality you're talking about. Not just how do I run the current process faster, but what if I fundamentally changed the process itself to really great effect. We've shared some stories of retailers that are starting to use agents and apps and automation together to totally change how they do things like fraud detection and even refunds and returns management. If I go contact an online retailer and say I want a refund, traditionally that's a human going and vetting, is that a real customer? Did they buy something, or is this fraud? Does it meet our return policy? Which is, by the way, usually like a 50-page PDF that changes once a quarter. And then do I want to issue the refund, or can I save them as a customer? And that's super slow. It's super inefficient, and it's really expensive, and often it's outsourced to vendors. Can I go implement an agent that does that instantaneously, or at least does major parts of it instantaneously? Really starts to change my operating and my risk profile and my customer relationships. And so, even in use cases like that, starting to see, millions of dollars of value unlocked really quickly, and just better customer satisfaction. Actually, the balance of value is really shifting towards that process expertise. And I think part of the challenge, though, is just, very few people with real jobs woke up this morning and said, God, I want to build a business application, or I want to automate a process. That's just not a thing that happens to most regular people. But a whole lot of people woke up this morning and said, man, this part of my job sucks. That could be better. I wish we didn't have to burn so much time doing X, right? And really harnessing that energy, that value, those skills and those people, and bringing great tools to them, that's part of the whole thesis behind why a platform is critical right now. What does it mean to totally change that interface into a human and agent collaboration space? What does it mean to go see the activity of what agents are doing on your behalf when they need your input?
Let's talk a little bit about Plan Designer.
Yeah.
We're seeing we go from manual to automated to agentic level orchestration, which is great. One of the key things too is going to be trust. We got to trust our systems. We got to be sure that the agent workflows we're building, that they're inspected, that they're constantly modified to be sure that they're right, that they're traceable. Like, talk a little bit about kind of how Plan Designer can help companies, because that's a lot of work, by the way.
Yeah,
that's a lot of work. You can automate or streamline some of that out of the process.
Yeah, well, look, for folks out there listening that haven't experienced plans in Power Apps, it's worth trying out. Just go to powerapps.com. You can try it today. But what it really is a different kind of AI-centric development experience. You go type into that box a business problem. We do not assume that you just want us to spit out 1,000 lines of JavaScript that you need an app. Like a lot of vibe coding platforms today. We actually do what a real software team would do. In fact, we've built in a digital software team. We've trained a requirements agent, a process agent, a data agent, a solution architect agent. It's a highly collaborative environment. This is not a sort of throw a paragraph over the fence and watch magic happen. It's really sort of training and teaching people with process expertise how to think like software architects and solution architects, so that they can know up ahead of time, why do I want AI to do certain things? Where do I want it to work? How do I want it to interface with humans? And that's really the foundation of that trust in a system.
Have you seen some examples out there of Plan Designer being sort of delivering promise? Because it sounds super optimistic. Are people using this?
100%. We have started to see really interesting sort of challenges thrown at it. We have customers in highly regulated financial services context that are taking decades of old homegrown, non-compliant software that was built over, whether it's hacked in Excel or built one-off, and sort of saying, can I use this to rapidly modernize what I had before in a way where traditionally going and turning all that old stuff into full stack software was just incredibly costly and cost prohibitive. Starting to bring those things into plans and generate a more robust plan for modern software, moving much faster. We've even seen huge extremes of that. I've seen a customer take 50-year-old COBOL code and just paste it into Plan Designer and say, what the heck is this program doing? And can you help me build a better version of it? And actually the results were pretty promising. So, people are getting really creative with, bring the problem, bring the challenge, bring, sort of the business area that you want to improve, and then start working with these agents and on this digital software team to design a solution.
So, we're doing all this work. We are trying to train people to think differently, remove constraints, whatever's possible. But the UI seems to be the next frontier. Like the old enterprise software is like, these are the things you can move and these are the things you can't, and what you can customize, and here's what you can't, and here's your dashboard. And it's like, great. But in the future, I might just want to say, hey, Microsoft, whatever, this is what I want to know today. And then I want it to obviously learn based on my behavior over time what I want to know.
Right.
And then I want it to continuously, things like that. How do you see being in this space so much, the kind of UI evolving?
Yeah. I think specifically chat as a UI is super compelling and natural for a lot of things. I do not believe that we're going to go regress 40 years of UI innovation and go all back to chat in the command line, though. Like, there's a lot of things for which text is actually a terrible modality, in which just paragraphs are not great. And I think there's a more underlying thing here that you're touching on, which is a lot of traditional experiences, whether it's text-based or visual, assume a human shows up knowing an intent, right? As opposed to an agent being really proactive and taking care of something for me or pushing me an update or a notification when I need to know it. And so I think those experiences start to evolve a lot. What gets really interesting is where they meet, and we really see a lot of this, task-based data entry, repetitive stuff increasingly getting delegated to agents on your team. But that means you'll need to work with that team in a totally different way. Right. And where a traditional CRM system or HR system or whatever, pick your business application was, previously, like we talked about, people typing into boxes and then other people viewing reports. What does it mean to totally change that interface into a human and agent collaboration space? What does it mean to go see the activity of what agents are doing on your behalf when they need your input? When they're blocked on something or they've noticed a trend or, there's a form they tried to fill out but didn't complete, then that's an important meeting space to go have experiences and user experiences. And a lot of times those do need to be structured in a visual way. A lot of times they could happen, ephemerally or with a chat message. But how do you route people to the right place at the right time? We're working across all of those fronts. That's why we have a robust set of tools in Copilot Studio for building the agent part of all of those things. It's why we have a ton of evolution in Power Apps, sort of becoming this new agent-centric experience where I can see a feed of that activity. I can have agents help me do the work in the applications. And those two worlds will just continue to evolve together as we start to bring things into the future.
Yeah, so you heard me talk a little bit earlier, Ryan, about governance. Governance is part of the critical constraint and one of the things that differentiates software, right? The reason we can't just use OpenAI for everything would be because it doesn't know how to handle the data. Be like, oh, let me talk, help me do a job offer, or help me do a compliant healthcare notice to somebody. Like, it doesn't know how to do that.
Right.
So building applications that do know how to do that is the key. You got to build it with, of course, we want to go fast.
Right.
So fast is the new rule.
Right.
But the trust and scale are the other words. I know you often use these words, but what do you think? And where are companies sort of struggling with governance and scale here with automation? And kind of how do you think what you're building in agent oversight can help them?
Yeah. So I'd say there's a couple dimensions to governance and scale. There's the breadth dimension. We have a whole lot more people who now can build a whole lot more things. How do I make sure that all that stays on the straight and narrow when I can't centrally top-down code review every single thing that every single person and agent is doing? And then there's sort of depth scale. When I do want to roll out a mission-critical solution to 100,000 employees that has AI in it, how do I make sure that that AI is not just functioning, but actually continuing to get better every single day? The good news is we're not inventing any of that from scratch. Breadth scale and depth scale were a challenge in the first generation of Power Platform. And something that we've built a ton of capability into the platform over the last couple of years to really tackle at huge scale. And we call that the managed platform set of capabilities. And within it, there is managed governance, managed security, managed operations for lifecycle, ALM management, stuff like that, and managed availability even. How do I go ensure high availability, run disaster recovery drills for critical workloads? All of that is built into solutions baked on the Power Platform. And all of that value accrues to this next generation of components being built as well. An agent built in Copilot Studio benefits from all of those managed capabilities. A new app built in Power Apps with intelligent capabilities in it benefits from that entire stack. And so that's why, you start to see even highly regulated financial services firms, government agencies, et cetera, really trusting Microsoft here as opposed to a 20-person startup that was founded yesterday, to really take the bet on standardizing for this segment of software. Then you get into the operational oversight. Okay, I have agents doing work. How do I have humans managing the work of those agents? That's not a developer role anymore. That's really an operational role. What does it mean to be an agent manager or an agent boss in a claims department at an insurance company or in a supply chain operation? That's where we need these new interfaces, and that's what Power Apps is building in with concepts like the agent feed. How do I build a purpose-built oversight experience for really high volume activity of agents?
This is one of those things that right, there's so much doubt across the industry about being able to do this in a sort of, when you give up the human in the loop, or even just have one maybe guiding, but you're moving so fast. It's like, are they safe? Are they auditable? Because when you're in a business, everything
100%.
you has to be traceable and trackable.
Yep.
Is it predictable, the outcome? Like,
Right.
hey, you're going to have an agent interfacing with your customers, or you're going to have an agent doing a bunch of accounting work, which, by the way, it's like a spiral. One mistake, and it's just,
Sure.
how that goes.
Yep.
Like, how are you guys overcoming that doubt, through the guardrails you're putting up, through the oversight, the accountability that you're kind of baking into your platform? Because I think you get over that hurdle, Ryan, we move a lot faster.
I think what's interesting here is actually a lot of our customers have had to build these systems already. A lot of our customers already operate critical processes across massive employee bases and even larger vendor teams that operate at arm's length already today, right? And we've already had to go build in a world of a whole lot of variability of who's doing a task. How do you create an audit trail? How do you create rules? How do you create data policies? How do you create oversight? A lot of those concepts exist today because there is variability in the human system, right? And so a lot of the way we approach this, okay, how do you adapt those existing concepts, policies, features, capabilities? How do you adapt that to a world where it's humans and agents doing the work? And what are the sort of incremental, sort of 10% shifts that you need to make in those systems to accommodate agents, but not completely, pave them and rebuild them from scratch, right? Because a lot of these sort of trust concepts or zero trust concepts in a security concept are already built into the system. And so there's a ton of work we're doing there in the managed platform, in a lot of the ways that a lot of the Microsoft security governance and oversight concepts apply to agents. And that's, again, one of the benefits of building on a mature platform and a mature system in Microsoft is, we're not having to recreate all that stuff from scratch like a point solution startup would have to do.
Yeah. So the last thing, just specifically on security. Security is a super hot topic.
Yep.
What do the customers, how do you want them to think about the approach? Because in the end, you can get it all governed and right, but you have to keep your doors closed, locked, and that's an increasingly large problem. AI is as much enabling it as it is fixing it.
Right. Well, look, we could probably spend an entire hour on security and threat model approaches in the AI era. It is absolutely critical, and like any security challenge, there is no silver bullet. Every customer needs to have a defense in depth strategy and needs to think about, what am I doing from a data security perspective? What am I doing from an exfiltration perspective? What am I doing from an access perspective? The good news is we have a lot of that built into the platform today. Even a customer building their first Copilot Studio agent and using the managed Power Platform to roll it out, we'll see a security score in the Power Platform Admin Center. We'll see AI-driven recommendations about what to do to improve that security score. It has a whole bunch of capabilities in there that go all the way to operate this in the cloud, but with a private VNet, with your own managed encryption keys. Again, we have a lot of highly regulated, very security conscious customers that are working with the platform today. I would say, though, to zoom way out and look at that, and maybe connect it to some of the rest of the conversation we've had, it is absolutely risky to go too fast. It is also very risky to go too slow. And the rest of the world is evolving, including threat actors and competitors, right? And so the cost of standing still is probably the most costly position to be in.
So let me, as an analyst, I have to ask you, because I've got a few things. But what kind of, in this whole evolution, this exciting moment for the future of apps and automation and agents, like what's kind of keeping you up at night? The biggest concerns that you see out there, and then what are the kind of upsides for you? Like, what do you most kind of think could be the biggest surprise into the future? Give us that big visionary moment here, Ryan, to take us home.
Look, I think I'll do that in reverse order. I think there's a ton to be excited about right now. And I think there's just so much potential and creativity that we can still unlock. One of the things that has always been special about Power Platform and the community that's formed around it, which is a huge diverse mix of people with 20, 30 years of deep software expertise, all the way up to people who have never touched a line of C# or .NET code in their life. What unites that community is this sense of, we can make something better. This can be better. Let's do it better. And I feel like we're at the precipice of just blowing a huge lid off of the ceiling of what you can do there. And there's a whole lot to be excited about. You joke about a night job. I stayed up last night vibing a Power App that's just a Tetris game because it was awesome and fun and so much faster to create it than it would have been in the last generation of the technology. And I think that's a tiny, tiny microcosm of, go take that creative energy and apply it to everything that's inefficient about every aspect of every customer organization today. We're really standing on the precipice of completely rewiring how companies work, and doing it with people who have deep expertise in that process and a deep desire to make it better. And that's just incredibly exciting to me in this moment. And then to flip it around, okay, so what stands in the way of that? It really is all about speed and pace of iteration. And really it's about time to wrong. There's so much that we need to go invent and co-invent with customers and experiment with, and try, and nobody out there is perfect right now. What will define winners and losers for technology companies, for customers, for operations is how fast can you be wrong, and then how fast can you get less wrong and more right. So that's the journey we're on. That's the hill we're climbing. But it's just a super exciting time to go think about what the top of the mountain can be.
Ryan, this was a lot of fun. It was a great conversation. Appreciate you sharing a little bit about where all of this is heading. There's so much potential for companies to really start reimagining and realize just how big of a leap forward we are having right now with AI, with agentic, and the work that you're doing in Power Platform. So Ryan, thank you so much.
100%. Really, really enjoyed the conversation, Daniel. Thank you for the time.
Everything about the way we work is changing very quickly, thanks to the advancements in applications and, of course, agents, automation, and what interfaces may look like in the future are all going to continue to change. And they're going to enable and they're going to power businesses to be more efficient and, of course, to be more productive. It was a great conversation over the last hour. We really did reflect across not just Power Platform and how they're thinking, how Microsoft is thinking about building its future, but really about how businesses should be thinking about developing their future, removing constraints, being able to look at problems in new ways, and then being able to apply software, and then being able to utilize resources in new ways that can deliver more value to your business and, of course, to the customers that you serve. And this is not going to be easy. It's going to take some time. There's going to be some effort, but it is something that can be done today, and companies can start to extract value right now. And moving quickly is going to be more and more important. That's something I'm seeing as an analyst, and that was clearly something that Ryan had seen as well. We talk a lot about that, is the customers that are moving fast are going to be the customers that get the biggest results and, of course, are able to benefit the most from those efforts. And lastly, we still have to keep all of those considerations that have existed with enterprise applications, with software that runs our businesses. And that's going to be the governance, that's going to be the controls, that's going to be security. And that, of course, is going to be putting people in the right roles and enabling them to do the work. All those things remain Similar, but of course with a new bend. We're going to upskill the talent. We're going to think about problems in new ways. We're going to move more efficiently. And together, we're going to drive the future. Great conversation. Appreciate everybody spending the hour with me. See you all soon.
Awareness of agentic AI has reached the general public, with millions of people, even outside the technology industry, deploying OpenClaw and other agentic systems. This episode of Utilizing AI features Dave Graham and Frederick Van Haren discussing the real status of agentic AI. Welcome to Utilizing AI, the podcast focused on practical applications of artificial intelligence from the Futurum Group. Every Wednesday, we explore news and use cases of the ways in which AI is transforming enterprise IT and the industries it serves. I'm your host, Stephen Foskett, president of the Tech Field Day business unit here at the Futurum Group. Before we dive into the conversation today, let's meet who's on the panel.
My name is Dave Graham. I'm the Director of Marketing at ML Commons Association. So we're a member-led industry technology standards organization that's designed around benchmarking and characterization, both in the AI risk and reliability space, as well as AI infrastructure space.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Frederick Van Haren. I'm the founder and CTO of Highfence, and we provide HPC and AI consulting and services.
And of course, I am Stephen Foskett, your regular host and good friend of good old Frederick and Dave here. We've known each other for many years. We've been talking about this stuff for many years. As I said in the opening, today we're going to talk a little bit more about sort of where the industry is at, where people are at with rolling your own agents. And I want to kick this off, with an anecdote. So I'm driving home last night or the other day and listening to NPR's Marketplace, and there's a guy on there. The guest on there is talking about agentic AI, and his pitch was essentially, "This isn't quite ready for prime time. We don't know exactly where it's going to go, but you, dear listener, not techie, just NPR listener, should be deploying agentic AI now so you don't get left behind." And he gave a metaphor for that about how basically if you're not experimenting with AI agents in your life and in your business, then you're going to be basically behind on the football field. And it got me thinking because, people like us are actively experimenting with this stuff. We also have a lot of technical skills, a lot of deep knowledge. Yet normies, as they say, are now being told, you got to go deploy this stuff. And frankly, OpenClaw has reached, especially in China, but increasingly here in the US as well, has reached public consciousness to an extent that people are out there, like regular people, normal people, are out there deploying agentic AI for themselves. And this is an interesting situation that we find ourselves in because, frankly, I have been aggressively experimenting with this stuff as well. And I'm not all that satisfied with the performance and the user experience of it. Let me throw this to you first, Frederick. What's your reaction to somebody telling normal NPR listeners on their drive home that they should deploy OpenClaw?
Well, I think the first problem is people don't necessarily have an understanding of an AI, but let that alone for a little bit. It's people want personal assistance, right? It's you have thousands of emails. You want to go through your email and figure out what did you miss in the last week. Do you need to go through all these emails? So people are looking for personal assistance and an entry to an easy AI solution. And I think today what we're seeing with OpenClaw and others, it's really the beginning. It's really easy to install it. They promote no code. The no code also comes with no understanding of what it's actually doing under the covers, which is a whole different conversation. But, I think what people are trying to do is to get a taste of AI. And they're trying to do that with some kind of an assistant that looks at their own data. To me, it's the beginning. Should we tell people to try it? I would say let's try to understand it first, what it can do for you, and also what it shouldn't be doing for you. I mean, if you give OpenClaw too much information, it actually will use that information, not necessarily for you, but in some cases against you. So it's the beginning. Should people experiment? I guess so, to better understand what it is. But should they bet the farm on it? I don't know.
Yeah, you know, I I always, I teeter on the edge of Ludditism, when it comes to some of this stuff.
Which is
I mean,
ironic, isn't it?
With
Because, I mean, here we are, but I feel
Yeah.
the same way, Dave. Yeah.
So I mean, it's the principle thing. Did I go out and buy a Mac Mini? Yes, I absolutely have a Mac Mini. It's sitting there right behind my head, running. I think I'm running some auto research benchmarks right now, right? Because it's the fascination that Frederick and I and you yourself have, Stephen, in these things is what keeps us going. But we're like, I wouldn't say we're the 1%, but we're the 1%, right?
Well,
When
the
we look
techie 1%.
we're the techie 1%, right? It's the running joke that, you go on Reddit and you see everybody complaining about X and Y silicon vendor not doing overclocking chips the right way. Well, dude, you're a rounding error in the relative environment of everybody else, right? But they're the ones that tend to yell the loudest, if you will. So I think we're in that type of situation at this point, right? Where, the pantomimes at conferences about OpenClaw or NemoClaw or whatever claw and Iron Claw. I mean, everything. It's going to be an evolution. Um, you're right, Frederick. I like acknowledge that everybody wants this concept of a virtual agent or a helper or assistant, right? I think this is I use one. Littlebird is mine. I'm on a Mac, and Littlebird's my go-to agent. It's rolls me up a journal every day of the activities that I've done and watches what I do and kind of interacts, and it's great because it keeps a level of logic into my day. It just starts to look at patterns. But again, this is a patterning engine underneath it all anyway. It's looking for patterns. This is something that's been designed to do statistically and kind of algorithmically. The next step beyond that is this, Stephen, to your thing about NPR. Should everybody experiment? Yes, sort of. You're always going to run into it. I mean, I can use Claude on Chipotle's chatbot, on their website, right? If I really want to do this. I mean, we're interacting with agents that we don't don't actually understand what we're doing every day. So I think there is this, again, that razor's edge of, should everybody experience it? Yeah, maybe. Are we experiencing it whether we know it or not? Yeah, absolutely. And we need to kind of figure out what that looks like. There needs to be an education cycle around it and all that to be said. So
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. So, I mean, first, a couple things to unpack there. First off, I had another interesting conversation this week about AI tools. And somebody asked me how we're using AI tools internally at the Futurum Group. And I said, it's funny because on the one hand, I think if I ask most people, they would say they're not really using AI as much as they would like to. On the other hand, if I zoom in on tasks that they perform every day, they're using AI tools everywhere all day long. And so it's like, but they're not thinking of them as AI tools. They're thinking of them as tools, you know? Oh, I need a transcript of this video. Boom, here's my transcript. Oh, I need a summary. I need some keywords. I need some information. Boom, throw this to ChatGPT. Use Apple's, built-in summary tool. Use Parakeet to and suddenly you realize that these tools are really pervasive in our daily lives. And so from that perspective, I think the use of AI tools really is already everywhere. But there's a different thing when we talk about using like an assistant. Now, I will say too, Dave, I also have been experimenting with Littlebird because a friend of mine suggested that it was a really helpful, advanced platform. I'm not gotten to the point yet where I can render judgment on it, but I'm excited by the idea that we will have professional usable tools out there. Because I will tell you, I didn't buy a Mac Mini because you don't have to buy a Mac Mini because it'll run on frickin' anything. I'm using actually a stack of old MacBook Pro as my MacBooks Pro as my my lab for OpenClaw, and I have a half a dozen of them running various incantations and incarnations of this thing because I wanted to see what it's like. I wanted to see what the default is like. I wanted to see a better way to deploy it. I actually, over this weekend, deployed it in Docker Compose in a very, very locked down situation. Previously, I had just deployed it with a bunch of junk data and a fake account because I am terrified of what it can do in your name if you deploy it. And frankly, I've been very disappointed with the default suggestions because on the one hand, everybody says this thing is dangerous. Don't give it access to everything in the world. But yet the default, normal, whatever, internet, go ahead and try this thing out instructions, give it access to everything in the world. I mean, it's like, it's the generic install is exactly the wrong way. And so that's why I'm kind of scared of people out there on, in front of the world saying, hey, go deploy this. Because if somebody actually Googles it or uses, ChatGPT and says, how do I deploy this thing? It's going to give you, I'm sorry to say, it's going to give you a terrible, insecure recommendation. And people are doing that. So, have you all tried it in various configurations? I mean, what are you doing?
So, I'll go, Frederick. Yeah. Just give you, I'll bounce it over to you in just a second. So my initial, I was early in the OpenClaw. I think I saw it, pop up at some point and I was like, all right, I'll try this. And I think this was before, it was before OpenClaw. So whatever it was, the name and nomenclature in the repository before that, before they kind of put the pretty ribbon on it to try to make it useful, quote unquote. It struck me that a lot of what it was trying to do were things that were low effort, low effort human things, right? It's, go out there and do X, Y, and Z, right? Just real basic kind of principles. And a lot of it, was feeding it my keys, my Anthropic API key or my Open Router key and, the things that you're not supposed to put in your .env file when you upload and things
like
that.
Oh my God, but OpenClaw.json has all your tokens and keys in it and people upload that all the time.
Well, and I've kind of come to this realization that OpenClaw is the next evolution of the Amazon billing problem that Corey used to talk about, where you all of a sudden wake up one day and everything in your bill is insurmountable. And people are humble bragging about how much they're, how many tokens they pass per month, or they're looking at their Anthropic bill, and it's just turning into this I don't know what you're doing, dude, but that's probably not it. So I approach it with, a certain amount of caution, just simply because listen, my life is pretty well boxed in and I want to keep it that way along the line. So my initial input was, this is good. It's a science experiment. It probably has some really reasonable outputs and pretty useful, for some things, but those are things that right now I want to do. I want to continue to engage in these type of things. And I'm really looking for offloading. Again, the concept of, take meeting notes for me. I don't need OpenClaw in order to do that. And Gemini doesn't.
No, all you need to do is be on any meeting in the world now, and you're going to get 12 different meeting notes.
My CRM has a marketing bot. Littlebird can record it. I can record it. Whatever. So, that was my inception. Frederick, what about yourself?
Yeah, I think when we look at AI being a tool, the interesting piece about AI-driven tools compared to, let's say, traditional tools is that the AI tools typically that are being promoted or pushed for are not really ready for prime time. It all started way back with the large language models, right? It's almost like it escaped out of a lab, and then the drive for large language models was really from a competitive perspective, right? It's the other large language model vendors that started pushing for it. And I feel like that's what's happening today too, is that a lot of these AI tools are kind of experiments, and we're kind of the guinea pigs to see what works and what doesn't work. And so that's the consumer side. And then when you look at the vendor side, the large language vendors, it's trying to remember what Jensen, the CEO of NVIDIA, said on stage at GTC a few weeks ago. Didn't he say something like, if the engineer is not spending 200K on tokens, then he's not doing it right? And so it's almost like the push for let's do it and generate as much or as many tokens as possible. But the reality is, and I understand, the reality is that us, the guinea pigs, using all those tools, it gives a lot of data to the vendors to work on the next level of AI tools. And so I don't think it's wrong for us to try these tools, but we have to realize that when OpenClaw came out, it was leaking data left and right. And it was not considered a concern. It was considered as, well, it's an experiment, it's an AI tool, use it at your own risk. But they make it so easy to use today that I don't think people understand what those tools potentially could do, And I think that's kind of the risk, right? So if we really look at AI tools and we transparently want to use them, we need a better way to make those tools ready for prime time without having to suffer the consequences afterwards.
Yeah, 100% agree. And that's actually my feeling. Again, I have now installed and configured and played with versions of OpenClaw for a few months. I have done half a dozen different from scratch implementations with different scenarios and different ways. And my verdict on it, at least as far as it stands today, is this is in no way ready for prime time, and people shouldn't be using this. But the amazing thing that it does, and this is the wow factor of OpenClaw, is that by allowing it to have persistent memory and a schedule and iterating over itself, it is as transformative as the sort of introspective GPT models were that came out at the end of last year, in that it takes things to an entirely new level simply because it's able to autonomously act and do things. Essentially, what it's doing is it's showing us where this technology is going to go next. And that, to me, is the exciting thing. So when we see NVIDIA on stage saying that they're going to create their own claw-like agentic, and we see OpenAI, acquiring the OpenClaw team, we see Apple and Google and, everybody else saying, that everybody is looking at that and saying, that's the guidepost. That's where we want to go. Let's go there. And I think that's healthy. I think that's where the industry should be. It should be looking at ways of building systems that deliver that wow, like OpenClaw, but aren't just incredibly bizarre, hacky science projects that barely work. And Dave, I know that you guys are working with a lot of these companies. There's a lot of this stuff coming, right?
Yeah, I mean, to even backtrack a little bit to what you just said, I mean, we look at the iPhone, for example, as the inception point for basically this turn of the wheel, this digitalization, an actual social phenomena that turned into a technical revolution, right?
Yeah.
It was the first time that you had really had the ability to, capture the world around you in more realistic ways, right? Embedded camera, you were interacting with a human interface to a machine. Right. And so actually in academia, we look at 2007 in the introduction, 2005, 2007 as in the introduction of the iPhone as one of a social revolution. When I view OpenClaw and tools like it as that kind of second step on that revolution, right? Because it's starting to embed into our social fabric the idea of, agents or non-human digital actors, right? That have or don't have, and not to make this into a entirely academic conversation, agency, or the ability to go out there and fulfill a role of its own devising, or fulfill a role that another, or Deus Ex Machina, right, to a certain extent, that somebody else is projecting upon it in order to kind of go and do, right? So a lot of that's kind of a prelude to why ML Commons, the reason why we're interested in characterization and kind of the embeddedness that we look at here is that we're interested in kind of the entire groundswell, what you build from the foundation on up. as well as top down, right? So infrastructure and silicon and all the technological marvels that make make it work, right? That you run on top of is one part of it. But the other part of it is that stickiness at the top, right? So Frederick, you talked about it, and Stephen, you talked about it as well. It's that human interface to these devices and the influence that those digital personas or those agents have on the world outside of them, right? There's a risk involved, right? You give it the wrong, we were joking prior to this thing about, having credentials in the .env file, right? Well, you put
Well,
those.
it's not even in the .env. It's right there in the JSON.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how you're running your thing, but this is something I had to learn as well, right? When you go back and do a code rabbit audit of a GitHub repository, anyway. So, but all these things out in the open, right? There's a certain risk and reliability aspect of it. I mean, you can call it safety if you want to, but risk and reliability kind of focuses in on this, where you start to see where this shapes markets, it shapes cultures, it shapes society, and that comes with its implicit dangers. We look at the mental health crisis that we already had. That's in our teen in the pre-formative brains of our youth. Worldwide, right? And you now exacerbate that by access to tools that build digital cliques and build these digital communities that are highly, focused in on, presentation, what you look like, and all these kind of invariable attitude, immutable attributes of yourself and all this stuff. Anyway, all of this stuff kind of starts to become, this really crazy foment of everything. So, I mean, again, it's delving into sociological and anthropological phenomena here a little bit, but that's the reason why ML Commons becomes so interested in these things. We're working on both ends of the stack to try to understand. It's a characterization, it's a benchmarking as well, but it's all a means to an end to understand better, ultimately how these tools will impact both infrastructure, the ecology, the power, the fundamentals of things from the silicon side, as well as the social side and cultural side from the risk and reliability perspective.
Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of realize where the focus is nowadays. It's at some point almost like all of the focus was on training. How do you get the greatest and the best large language model? So everybody expected the large language model to do all of the heavy lifting. Today, the shift is completely different. I mean, there's a bunch of vendors generating large language models, but they're roughly good enough in order to get going. And so I feel, certainly from our perspective, and certainly ML Commons too, where originally there was only a focus on training. Now it's all on the inference and more consumer, let's call them tools if you wish. But that's where the focus is to make it a lot better and improve and innovate. And I think that's what we should expect moving forward. I mean, me personally, I still think that large language models would benefit from more specific markets, more market driven as opposed to being generalist. But in the end, for now, it's not bad to focus on tools that can deal with those large language models and continue to innovate.
Yeah, that's a real good point, Frederick. And that's been my experience as well. I'll just say that I have been actively hopping back and forth between, OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, as well as the open weight models. Quen and Kimi, and what I found is that, frankly, these models are really good. They've gotten very, very good today. Yes, some of them are better than others, but at least as far as agentic applications go, at least as far as my experiments have gone, the defining factor, honestly, is the cost per token, not like this model is far and away better. I agree with you, Frederick, though. I think that there's probably headroom for somebody to develop better tool calling models, lighter tool calling models. Especially as we deploy more and more systems that have agents and sub-agents and so on. I mean, I'm using, for example, I've got a Gemini Flash instance and a sub-agent that's basically only doing security scans and tool calling. And so that, I can use a very lightweight, quick little model for that little guy. Whereas, you might want to use a heavy duty, GPT for your real agent, that kind of thing. But a lot of that stuff is still fiddly dial turning. And that's why I'm more excited and more interested in kind of where this goes. There are companies that are going to be developing these things and rolling them out, and people are going to be experiencing these things increasingly. I don't think that that's going to be a situation where people are deciding, oh, do I want to use Anthropic or OpenAI? I think it's going to be a situation of I signed up for such and such application and it just freaking works and it just does the thing. And then it's more of a question for that service provider to decide how and when and which models to develop and so on. And then that kind of leads us to the next point. And I want to kind of jump into where Dave was going here with kind of what does that do to us? What does that do to society if we've got sort of a silicon persona that exists in our lives that is assisting us? I love the idea, especially if it works. What does that do to everything? And Dave, I know you got some thoughts here.
I have lots of thoughts.
As I expect, you have lots of thoughts about things.
Well, I mean, I always like to joke. Or actually, even to my executive director, we both come from the humanities side, not the computer science side, right? And I have 2 degrees in psychology and counseling, and worked as a social worker here in the state of Massachusetts, right? So very human based, right? So the impact of two of things on bureaucracy, even on society, and a lot of these things was part and parcel of what kind of I grew up in terms of my knowledge with. So I'm very probably pragmatically more interested in looking at the effects of these tools on society, right? How does this increase a person's agency, their ability to function as society, right? So if we look at, I have huge issues with the way this was expressed, but if we look at this concept of universal basic compute, which a certain individual from a company that I will not name talked about, versus a universal basic income, right? I live off money. Universal basic income is a good thing. It provides a common platform. If I look at universal basic compute and we look at kind of the analogous relationship between those two, if I'm providing this level of computational credits or tokens or whatever you want to call it these days, I feel like I'm going to Chuck E. Cheese. Hey, here's your tokens. Like throw it in the ball pit and see what happens, right? Is there a positive benefit that comes out of this for somebody that doesn't know how to use these systems? Going back to the original thesis of NPR, talking about how everybody should experience it. If I look at my mother, who, congratulations, is made 80 years old this month, right? Like, this is a huge milestone, but she's not interested in an agent telling her what to do. She's interested in being able to function and engage with her doctors and, the services that are required of the elderly mindset. So a lot of these things, and as I get older, I care less and less about, the fancy stuff and more about just being able to live life, right? So I think this is where there's a possibility here where some of those offsets become taken over by digital actors. I think let's solve the bureaucracy problem. How do I get to my benefits if I'm on Medicare or some sort of social benefit? How do I solve going to the DMV or the RMV problem, which everybody universally hates, right? So a lot of these things, how do I understand bills, and having these type of things become a positive, I believe, net benefit to society over time. And this is where that capability of models that are increasingly trained on public data sets that start to understand common systems and processes and problems that we all encounter in our daily lives, whether we want to believe it or not. Solving a tax problem or, interacting with these things. I think this is where there's a lot of, net positive effects. There's always going to be room for the 1% or 20% or however you want to call it in the digital space where you can kind of push the envelope and figure out, hey, now you could do stock trading, with your OpenClaw instance, and you can give it your portfolio and let it run wild. That's an exception to the general rule. And I think this is where, we're seeing these kind of step functions go into place, right? Where it becomes useful. That's the part I'm excited about. I'm less excited about a compression from the top down where you must use in order to function. I think that's the wrong way that this thing. It should be a socially augmentative type approach versus a compressive or oppressive approach of you have to use, you must use in order to participate in society. So
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I think those tools can help us do some tasks. I mean, there is a risk is that you built a digital twin that pretty much takes over, right? I mean, there's a lot of services today that are relying on interaction with assistants, and so the last thing I want is to have a large language model that makes decisions for me because it believes it has all the data for me. So I still want to consider AI as a tool. I still want to be in control. I want it to improve my life, but I'm not a fan of creating a digital twin that can speak for me, so to speak, right? So I think in general, it's an exciting time to live. I had another conversation with a colleague this morning. The market is going so fast that it's very difficult to try it all out. There's a clear shift from training to consumer/inference. It also means that the audience got a lot wider. It's not difficult to install these tools, but I still feel like we're experimenting, and to consider those tools as ready for prime time. I think we're not there yet, but that doesn't mean that people shouldn't try it out, experiment, learn from it, and also understand that AI is just more than buying a Copilot license.
Yeah, and for that matter, I will echo my friend from NPR and say anyone listening to this show really should be trying this stuff out. You know what I mean? I would say that anyone who is motivated to listen to an enterprise AI show like utilizing AI, if you haven't gone out and tried installing OpenClaw, you should. I will say that you shouldn't do it on your primary Mac with all of your data and applications on it. I strongly recommend doing it in a sandbox and doing it slowly. The installation will ask you to connect to everything. Don't, in fact, start by connecting to nothing and then add connections later as you feel more comfortable. Worry about security. Make it read only. That's a very good idea. Don't let it send emails or post social media or do stock trades on your behalf. That's just a terrible idea. But basically, it's gotten to the point where you need to try it. That being said, I don't think that this is going to be the end all be all. I think that again, this is OpenClaw is really a surprising transformative use of this technology, and I think that what we're going to find is that there are going to be companies, and I'm going to just say right now, I look forward to what Google does. I look forward to what some of these companies that have a lot of experience building these things do in order to build agentic experiences and agentic companions for people that actually deliver the goods. Like Frederick said too, I'm going to throw this one out there too. I think that there's a looming conflict and question about whether we will have a digital twin that acts as us or a fake person that supports us and interacts with the public, or an invisible agent that gives us superpowers. And we'll see where we go with that. I've actually been experimenting with all three scenarios to see what would happen. The first one, obviously, in read-only mode, because I don't want it to go out there and share some crazy stuff. But it's been interesting to see sort of to what extent it's able to duplicate me or duplicate a person or just assist me. So we'll see where that goes. We do have to wrap. We're getting toward the end here. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you each a chance to tell us a little bit about how we can continue this conversation, because as you can tell, I think that we all have a lot to say. We are all going to be at AI Field Day coming up next month. I can't wait to see you in person and have these conversations in person. And those of you listening, of course, we would love for you to join us for those videos. Check out Tech Field Day website for more information on that. You can watch them on YouTube and LinkedIn and Techstrong. But of course, if you're listening as well and you're saying, I'm just as good as Dave and Frederick, I should be part of this thing. We can also have you join us. So reach out. I'd love to have you join us in the future. So before we go, Dave, where can people continue this conversation?
So I'll be the boring guy and say, hey, you can find me at AI Field Day. I think number 8. Yeah, 8 next month in
right.
Santa Clara. Otherwise, I am on LinkedIn like a gnat, most simply because I'm doing a whole bunch of benchmarking characterization. You can find me on GitHub, Elemental Collision. I have an auto research repository that I'm working through right now with a good acquaintance that I've made through this benchmarking and characterization process. And I have a little sneak peek of a project coming up that I'm hinting at on LinkedIn as well. That's kind of talks to a lot of what we've talked about today. What happens when you let an agent just become, and so that's out there too, and more revealed in time. Not quite ready yet, but yeah, Frederick.
Yeah. So I will also be at Tech Field Day AI. I don't think I missed one. So I think I went to all of them. So hopefully I didn't jinx it. But I'm looking forward to see everybody face to face, no AI assistants, interfering. And you can find me on LinkedIn as Frederick V. Heron and on our website, highfence.com.
And as for me, of course, I will also be at AI Field Day 8, which again is May 13th through 14th or through 15th. And Frederick, I believe that you have been to all of them. Also, this week, as you listen to this, I am at Click Connect in Orlando. Click is a great data company, and we're going to be talking a lot about the relationship between data and AI and how that all works out. And so I look forward to the experiences there. Of course, it's going to be a great event. Frederick, you're at Click Connect as well, so folks can learn more there. And of course, you'll find me every week here on the Utilizing AI podcast, as well as every Monday on the live Techstrong gang, where I get to shout and have people in the building say, what is Steven so upset about today? It seems like that's my experience every week. So listen in on Mondays for the Techstrong gang. So thank you all for listening, especially, Dave Frederick, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to have this conversation. I do look forward to having more of these conversations in the future. If you're listening to this and you enjoyed this, please do subscribe. The best place to do it is YouTube, where you'll see our lovely faces. But of course, you can also find us in your favorite podcast application. And reach out. We'd love to hear from you. This podcast is brought to you by the analysts and experts from the Futurum Group, where insights meet AI. For show notes and more episodes, head over to techstrong.ai, the Utilizing AI YouTube channel, or the Techstrong TV app. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next week.